We ran out of time for our last example today in class, so I want to go ahead and do that for you here. Find the absolute max or min of f of x equals cosine squared x plus sine of x on the interval 0 to 2. So the first thing we have to do is we have to make sure it's continuous. Cosine squared is continuous, sine squared is continuous, so their sum is continuous. So f of x is continuous on the interval 0 to 2 pi. So the extreme value theorem applies. Okay. So the next thing we have to do is we have to find f of 0 and f of 2 pi. Now, f of 0 and f of 2 pi are actually going to equal each other because on the unit circle, they're located in the same place. So I can say cosine of 0 squared plus sine of 0. Cosine of 0 is 1, 1 squared is 1, sine of 0 is 0, so therefore this f of 0 equals f of 2 pi, which would equal 1. Now I'm going to take the derivative. So f of x is really cosine of x quantity squared plus sine of x. Because of the squared, we're going to have to do the chain rule. So f of x, or f prime of x, is going to equal 2 cosine of x times, now the derivative of cosine is negative sine x, plus the derivative of sine of x is cosine of x. I want to set this equal to 0, so in order to do so, I'm going to factor out a cosine of x. So 0 equals cosine of x times negative 2 sine of x plus 1. So 0 is equal to cosine of x, and sine of x is equal to negative 1 divided by negative 2, which is a half. So we've already done cosine, inverse cosine of, we have not already done this, it's working backwards. So to finish solving, I'm going to do inverse cosine of 0, would be x, and then over here, inverse sine of 1/2. So using our unit circle, I get x is either going to be pi over 2 or 3 pi over 2 when cosine is 0. And when inverse sine is a half, that's going to be x is pi over 6 or 5 pi over 6. So now I have 4 critical numbers that I have to try to substitute into f of x. So f of pi over 2 would be, my original equation was cosine squared, so cosine of pi over 2 squared plus sine of pi over 2, which would give me 1. If I do f of pi over 6, that will give me 1.25. F of pi over 2, I just did that one, is 1. F of 5 pi over 6 is also 1.25. F of 3 pi over 2 is negative 1. And f of 2 pi is 1. So now looking at these, I have maximums at pi over 6, 1.25, and 5 pi over 6, 1.25. And then I have a minimum at 3 pi over 2, negative 1. So the maximum value of 1.25 occurs at pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. The minimum value of negative 1 occurs at x equals 3 pi over 2.